Hello, hello, and good morning. This is Shelley-Ann Edwards Barron, your creative writing specialist, here with the final session of Journey to SEA 2024. And boy, has it been a journey. Now, I know I didn't really send out a notice to say whether or not I'd be with you guys today. I did mention it last week, but just in case, I put a note in SEA Peace Filled. But I think today there's no, lesson on grammar or creative writing or the comprehension. These are just my final words and final thoughts to wrap up the season. And like I said, boy, has it been a season. I think this year was the year that I really got into it because in prior years I didn't do comprehension. I added in comprehension kind of on the later part of the season this year. So definitely for 2025, which we'll talk about in a little bit, I will be adding in comprehension and I'm considering covering a little bit of grammar and different things as well. Now, to do that, I might not be able to spend as much time as I did with the creative writing, but we'll see. I'm working it out to see the best format so that I could cover as much as possible. And I want to say thank you before I do anything else. One of my greatest focuses this year was on gratitude in my personal life. And so I want to start the program by saying thank you to all of you who were able to come in on the live, send me questions, send me messages, let me know when you needed things, and asking for the advice and the information. And for those of you who reached out as well. I really do want to say thank you because one of the things I know for a fact, if you don't ask questions and you don't make comments, then I'm not going to know what it is that you need. And therefore, this program would not have been the success that it has been had it not been for the questions and the comments that I got along the way. So, thank you so much. And we are, I guess, 2 days out from the end of the journey. We are heading into it. And I know my daughters are long past SEA. My second daughter did SE in 2020 through all the COVID hullabaloo. And I think, so for me, I am going into this as a teacher. So I have several children going into it. I think this year I have about, let's see, about 20 students. 21 students, give or take a few, going into the exam. And I think I am more anxious for these students than I was with my own daughter because at the time I did not really understand the details of SEA, which is why I decided to do this SEA and Journey to SEA program and why it has evolved so much over the years. Because when I did when I went into SEA the first time with my first daughter, she was one of those dream students who she would study on her own, she would focus on what she needed to do, and really, I was just like a bystander, you know. Would you like a drink of water? Are you okay? And I always got yes, mommy. So that first time around with SEA, and that would have been 2015, that first time around, I really didn't have anything to do. I signed up schools because, and I can't even tell you, just because, right? So, and she went on, she got into one of the top schools, and that was the end of it. She did extremely well. And so I never really thought about it. But when 2020 came around, and my second daughter was going into it. She was one of those students who needed a little more support. And that's when I realized what SE really was about and how much preparation is needed And that's when it occurred to me that being a creative writing person, being a writing specialist, being an editor, being somebody who is into the language, that I could offer some help. And I am so grateful for the opportunity to do this that I'm definitely going to go again for Journey to SCA 2025, and I'll share the dates about that later on. So, for those of you who are going into SEA again, and for those of you who know people going into SEA 2025, we will be doing the journey again. And this time around, I'm going to start with the comprehension from the beginning so that we would be covering at least the reports, narratives, and comprehension right from the get go. I think today's episode is episode 43. So we generally work with about 42 to 43 sessions as we go. And this year we covered quite a lot. And while it might seem a bit heavy going into the exam, I think students are prepared. For those of you who've been following, I know that means that you have been working with your child, you have been working with your students, and the students are prepared. Now, not everybody's going to get 20 out of 20 in the creative writing. Not everybody's going to get 96% in the ELA, but everybody is going to do their best. Why? Because they are prepared and they're going into the exam calm and confident, knowing that whatever they do, however things work out, they are loved going in and they will be loved coming out. And that's the number one message that I want to share with you. When my second daughter wrote SEA, going into it, I knew that she would not get 20 out of 20 or even pretty close to that because of the preparation I knew she had going into. Like I said, I was not prepared at that time. Now I understand it a lot better so that I could prepare students more effectively. But going into it, I knew in my heart what level she would be, and I knew the plan I had for her at that time, and I knew regardless of what she did, she would be loved and she would be cared for moving forward. And that's the one thing that I really strongly made sure that she understood, so that coming out of the exam, she passed for her second choice, and her second choice wasn't one that a lot of people would consider the best school and those kinds of things, but it was a school that I know she would be supported at home and otherwise, so it really didn't make that much of a difference. As long as the school was okay, we would be able to handle it at home. And so when she passed for her second choice, she came home excited and happy. She got the hugs and everything. Unfortunately, it was COVID time, so we didn't get all these specials and wonderful things that I see posting. I'm like, damn, she really missed out on that, the this percent off of restaurants and all those things. Yeah, we didn't get that. We were kind of in lockdown still when she did that, but she was all excited and she was happy. And now in her life, we made lots of different changes after the exam. But the one thing I know is that she was never afraid, and she was confident that whatever happened, her parents would love her, her sister would love her, family, everybody would be proud of her, regardless of what happened. So that's really it. Before we get into anything else, for me, that's the number one thing, because there is life after SEA. Lots of stuff happening after SEA. In fact, SEA is not necessarily the end of something, it's a transition. It's a transition into secondary school, which brings a whole different ball game. In fact, from next term, the next piece of advice that I want to give you is from next term, after you take a break, because believe me, I know the work that you guys put in, you all need a break. The little one, the parents, guardians, everybody who was on this journey really supporting need a break. After you take a break, start looking at what is next. Take a look at what secondary school is going to bring. Because regardless of what school your child goes to, they are going to need to create study schedules, create programs. You need to look at extracurricular activities because you want holistic development of your child. You need to look at maybe transport situations. Start thinking about all of these things now. Start thinking about the textbooks because I would tell you that first, listen, that first book list. Woo! Yeah, we know what the cost of textbooks are these days, right? And yeah, so if you haven't already been saving for secondary school, and I know probably not because of all the input that you've given to the SE and leading up to SE, start putting aside a little bit right now to go toward the uniforms, the textbooks, and those kinds of things. I know the exam is Thursday, and you're still probably thinking about, okay, what can I do in this last minute to support with the exam? That is going to pass really quickly. The exam is Thursday, and then after the exam, in as much as this exam is significant, time doesn't wait. Once that exam is finished, the next thing is going to be what is next. So plan your break, plan what you're going to do during the break, how you're going to really enjoy the freedom away from SEA, and then also have an idea of when you're going to start putting things together for the next level, the next part of the journey. So while for me, I am going to be repeating, meaning that I'm going to go back to the starting point for Journey to SEA 2025, and I'm heading to SEA again with additional students. Most of you will be moving on to Form 1 and navigating that whole process, moving from one one teacher for the most part. I know some schools have like maybe two or three teachers, but moving from 3 to 6 subjects with one teacher or a couple toward individual teachers for individual subjects, sometimes up to 13 subjects at a time, that is going to be a transition. So I think one of the things that would actually make the essay exam a little more at the level that it should be, yes, it's important, but it's not the end all, is thinking a little bit beyond. Because at this point, you have done what can be done regarding the work. You need to know your child so that you would know if pausing now and taking a little break, light revision kind of thing makes sense, or if you go down to the wire. Some children are different. Some children, you carry them right up to the Wednesday night doing work, practicing. They feel energized with that. Some students will feel overwhelmed with that. So, this is a good time to have another conversation because I'm hoping that you've had several. Have another conversation with your child or your children and let them know, hey, ask them questions. What would you like to do? And then based on their response and based on your monitoring them over the past few weeks and so you would know light revision or just rereading or whether or not you're going to be doing practice, especially with the comprehension and different things going up right up to it. So there's a lot of advice out there what to do and what not to do, My understanding, having done it twice, even though the first time it was so different, is really to know your child. For me, the reason it was so different is because my children are so different. And I'm sure parents of multiple children, you know, each child is so different. Sometimes you wonder, are they really siblings? I mean, you might see the physical resemblance, but are they really siblings? They are so unique and individual people in their own right that sometimes you wonder, these kids really related? I mean, this one is so different. So, um, my journey for with my kids was so vastly different because of the differences in their personalities and the differences in the type of people they are. So and even now, as they're older, I can see those same differences playing out. And so I had to approach each one quite differently based on the student that I was dealing with, based on the child that I was dealing with. And that's the same thing I apply to my students because students are so very different. I've had students who I mean, they absolutely hated writing. And so for me, my main agenda with that student while we were working on the skills was to shift that mindset from hating writing to at least appreciating the value of it. I'm not going to aim for love because, I mean, that's a personal thing. Some people, I mean, they don't really care for it. That's not their skill set. That's not what they're interested in to do in life. So it's not a number one issue. However, they do need to appreciate the value of it and recognize that knowing how to do it well doesn't mean that you have to love it and you don't have to be, that doesn't have to be your gift in order to be able to write well. And so that would have been my focus for that child. For the child who already loves writing and wants to write, but they're having difficulties, then of course my focus would be on getting them to practice and review on different things. So different students, the approach will be different. And so know your child, know your students, and know what would be the best to support them. Usually that comes with having a conversation. Definitely having a conversation with them to find out how they are feeling and what they are thinking going into the exam. Because, and I've said this over and over, I've said it in this session already, going into the exam feeling calm and confident, that is the time when a student would feel their best and absolutely do their best regardless of what comes to them. And there's a difference between confident and what we call overconfident. Overconfidence actually comes from a, a position of fear. There is still some fear and doubt with this overconfidence that we call it overconfidence, but it's really a sort of underlying doubt in going into the exam that causes students to be dismissive. That's not what you want. You know this is an important exam. You know that doing their best is naturally important, and you don't want them to dismiss any issue. Oh, I know that, so I can figure it out. And yeah, man, I will ace that. And yes, this is easy. We know how that kind of overconfidence, as we name it, leads to, making mistakes that could have been avoided and so on. And I never use the term silly mistakes because a mistake is a mistake. It's silly because we think it's trivial, but there's always a reason for it. And if the reason is that the child was being careless, why were they being careless? Why didn't they pay attention to this a little bit more? And so those are the kinds of things that you need to think about. Not necessarily, okay, stop making silly mistakes. What's the cause of this? And so going into the exam, you really want your child to feel, yes, this is an important exam. I am prepared because I have been practicing, I have been studying, I know what to do, and therefore, going into the exam, I am just going to do my best because I know mommy's going to love me still, daddy's going to love me still, miss is going to love me still. And I don't know if, yes, I hesitated on that a little bit because I know Teachers are anxious just as much as parents are anxious. Like I said, I am a bit anxious, not necessarily because I think my students won't do well. I believe in all of them and I know they've practiced, and I've seen students come from getting consistently 10 and 11 to now making consistently 16. And so their progress is amazing. And I know they're going into the exam with that confidence. But I am still a little bit anxious because of the nature of the situation. And, I really want them to do well. So that, anxiety is there still. But I believe in them. And I think students need to know that, to know that you trust them to do their best. And whatever happens when they come out of it, they will still get their hugs and kisses. And when results come out, they will still get their hugs and kisses. If they do well, they do well. If they don't do as well as anticipated, it's an exam, then you think of how to deal with that at that point. So just really work on that level of confidence going into the exam and students feeling calm. And then for us as the adults, we need to work on some calm for us too, right? Because students really do pick up on your energy. They pick up on the vibe of the situation, and even you don't even have to say anything. The looks and the size and all those things, they do make a difference. So what I would recommend in terms of like practical, um, you know, specific, looking at the work itself. So we're dealing with the student and their feelings and their confidence. And to me, at this point, that's number one. But of course, how do we make that practical to reinforce this confidence and so on? What is needed is what I call a list of reminders. So when I closed off my classes, and I've already closed off um, most of my SEA classes, because we've done all the practice that we can do at this point. I'm leaving it up to parents, but of course, I'm not just, telling parents, okay, I'm done. We did go through a process of making a list of reminders. And so, what I did with the students, and I didn't just tell them, okay, this is what you have to do, and gave them the reminders. What I did was to discuss with them what they would need to be reminded of. And so they gave their points on the list, and then I added in areas where I think, based on the students and their writing and what I know, they have challenges with, I added in some of the pointers. And so the process then this week, meaning like today and tomorrow, we are going into a situation where we're sitting down maybe for like half an hour to an hour, and just discussing with the students. And you're going through, in our case, we did each section of the ELA exam, and then for reports and for narratives. So for spelling, what are the things you feel like you need to be reminded of? What are the areas that you'd like a little note about? And then we started listing it. So some students said, well, miss, we need to read the entire passage, the couple of sentences, read things in context. And so we created a list for spelling. Then we did punctuation and capitalization. What are you doing there that you think you need to be reminded of? Um, are you losing any marks there? And for situations where students were scoring really well in an area, we made a note: keep doing what you're doing because you're already crushing it in this area. And for I did this for my individual students and for my group students. So depending on the student, we use different phrases. But when a student is doing well in an area, it's not a matter of, okay, leave that alone, focus on the areas that you're not doing well in. When a student is doing well in an area, in this list that you're making of reminders, remind them that they're doing well, and that they are crushing it. They are doing great in this area. So, whatever it is they're currently doing, keep doing it because it's working. And I tell students that all the time. When I see them consistently doing well in an area, I say, "Woo, this is awesome. Remember, what did you do here that cause you to get these marks so well?" And sometimes they would say, "Well, miss, I just did this and I just did that." I say, "Well, okay, remember that because that worked. Don't forget it. Remember it because it worked and keep doing it." Because we need to encourage students in doing the good things well. And when they are doing it well, we need to remind them of that as well. Because I know in terms of improving a student's mark, the way to improve a student's mark is to identify the areas that are not working, figure out what's the cause, address the cause, create a strategy, and then implement it. And so, quite often, we focus a lot on what was done wrong, what the errors were, and so on. At this point, going into the exam, when you're doing that comprehensive review and reminder process, you absolutely want to say, hey, okay, if you get 6 out of 6 in the spelling, in the punctuation section, sorry, or if you're getting the 12 out of 12 in the spelling, keep doing what you're doing because that's working. And we write that down as well. So we went through spelling, we went through punctuation, and the capitalization, we went through grammar. What are the areas you want to be reminded of in the grammar? What are the points you think that would help you going into the exam that you can remind yourself, this is what I need to do going into the exam? Then we did the nonfiction comprehension. What are the things that you want to be reminded of? Then we did fiction comprehension. What are the things you need to be reminded of? Then we did poetry and then the graphic. And so we went through section by section and discussed, what are you doing that works? Let's remember to keep doing that. What do you think would help you based on where you are? What do you think would help you do your best? And we listed that. And then we went to report writing. What are the key points to remember for a report? We listed those things. What do you need to be reminded of personally? What are you doing well? We listed those things. And then we did that for the narrative. And so at the end of each session, at the end of each class, I was able to present parents with a list. These are the things in the last few days, these are the things to review. These are the things to remind your student of, remind your child of. This is what they can do to remember what they're working on. This is what they can say to themselves to feel encouraged. And so that instills in the students a level of confidence going into the exam that you can't just say, okay, be confident. There has to be something tangible and practical behind it to support being confident going into the exam. And so, reminding the students of their hard work, reminding them of where they came from when they started and what they're doing now, that shows them that they're going into the exam prepared. And so, what I started doing this year, and when I say this year, I mean this academic year, I did it with my students last term, but then I refined the process this term. At the beginning of my classes, the very first class, I discuss with students what the requirements are, and I take a check of where their current scores are. So, what are you scoring in reports? What are you scoring in narratives? What is your current score in each of the sections for the ELA paper? And I write that down. And then we discuss, okay, based on where your scores are now, where do you think you can get to by midterm? And then at midterm, we review. And then where do you think you can get to by the end of the term? What does it take to get you there? So we set intentions, we set goals, we set targets. And of course, a student who is doing 10, if they tell me 20, I say, okay, can you realistically get to 20 in 3 weeks or in 4 weeks. And then we discuss, okay, what do you think you can realistically do? Let's try to add maybe 4 marks. What can be done to add these 4 marks? And so we set these realistic goals and we set these intentions. And so coming down to the end of the term, we go back and we check, this is where you were, these were your intentions, did you achieve them? And for the most part, students either hit their goal or they were like maybe 1 or 2 points short. So a student might have been doing 10 and they were aiming for, let's say, 16 and they landed on 15. That's an accomplishment still. So then what can we do to fill in that 1 point extra that we were aiming for? And so that helps you set those targets. So at this point, where you're looking at where the student was, where they are now, what was their target, and what can be done to fill in that target. And so students would be going into the exam with realistic expectations, knowing their own ability, knowing what they are capable of, and stepping foot into opening that booklet, looking at the pages, seeing that, hey, I got this. I understand. I know what I need to do. I know how to implement it. And for the areas that I think I am not so good at, I have a plan on how to deal with it. And so that's the absolute best way in terms of practically going into the exam with that confidence. That's the way you achieve that. So, of course, you love them with the hugs and the kisses for those of you who allow them to give the, yeah, we know some of them, they don't want any hugs and kisses, right? But you show them you love them, let them know, hey, it's important. You're doing this. We're going to get it done. I'm right there with you. You're not alone. When you come out, I'm going to hug you and kiss you. Yeah, you'll still get that, and so on. But then you give them the practical strategies and methods to support that. So, yes, we want the mindset and the confidence, but we also need the practical strategies. And so we do the practical strategies by going through making that list. So when your kids come home this evening after school, sit with them. If they're already home, set aside some time, about an hour, hour and a half, depending, because remember, you want to go through every section: spelling, punctuation and capitalization, grammar, fiction text, non-fiction text, because we have two options there. Then we do poetry and then the graphic. Then we do report writing and narrative writing. So if you allocate like about, say, maybe um, 15 minutes for each section, we're looking at roughly about an hour and a half to an hour and 45 minutes. And you want to go through each and make that list. Now, of course, you don't want the list to look like, for each section, you don't want each section to look like, 25 things in the section. So you want to, I would say, tap out at maybe like 10, maximum 10, and you want to write these things down, physically handwrite it or type it up. And if you're typing it up, print it, right? Because you want that physical copy, and stick it up if you can, but definitely have it somewhere that they would be able to see it. So you don't want to get that list across 10 in each category, in any of the categories, and you don't want all the categories together on one page for it to look overwhelming. So if it is, let's say, for example, for the spelling, grammar, and punctuation, um, you have like maybe 2 points each, you could put that on one page because that's the task, right? Tasks 1 to 3, that's the first section. And then you have each one of the others on another page. If the list crosses 5 at any point, have it definitely on its own page. If it's like 3 to 4 in one point, you could put like maybe two to a page kind of thing because you don't want it to feel overwhelming. You might want to choose a slightly larger font than regular typeset, and just so that it will feel enough and not too much. And that's the kind of thing that you really want going into it. So we have the review, sit down and do the review section by section, and all the while reminding them, hey, you're good, you've practiced, you are prepared, and I know you will do your best. And going into the exam, just know that I love you. That's kind of like what you're covering going into the exam. So I think that's pretty much about it regarding the um, preparation for the actual exam itself, and for the student, helping them feel confident. And I think if you work on that in the next couple of days, both you and your child or students would go into the exam. Little butterflies will still be there, but then they would know what to do, and you would also know what to do. Take a deep breath, and so on. And I mean, I've seen posts, what are you going to do while the students are in the exam? Lots of people pray if you're the praying kind, most definitely. Um, and what you're praying for, I would suggest, is, that students remember that they feel calm. Pray for yourself, pray for the examiners, pray for everybody. Just cover the entire situation with love and pray. And I've also seen advice. Now, last year coming into the exam, I did interviews with um, counselors, with nutritionists, and different categories of people, so that parents could feel as confident as possible going into. And of course, we want to keep routines, because students have been doing and going and going and going in a set routine for a long time, preparing for the exam. You don't want to break that. The exam is the point. Once the exam is complete, then the situation is complete. And after that, you change routines. But until the exam is done, you are still maintaining the routine. So when it comes to like studying and focusing on the exam has been part of the routine. So even though you may want to go lighter going into the exam, you don't want to stop, right? So you don't want to just cut out all studying and cut out all preparation and reviews and that kind of thing. You want to still keep the routines that you've had, and just fill the time and space with something a little less tedious, if that's the kind of child that you're working with, or keep going depending on how the child works. But you don't want to stop or change the routine in any way, because remember, humans are creatures of habit. And so you've already kind of created that kind of habit going into, in all the preparations and stuff that you've done. So don't just stop it. Just continue with the same routine. Maybe do something a little lighter, but definitely you want to keep and maintain that routine. Um, Sleep, water, nutrition, and so on going into the exam. Routines to reduce anxiety. You've heard me talk about that 5 4 3 2 1 practice several times. I use it personally. I share it with all my students. So those kinds of things, yeah, going into the exam. So I I am confident that students will do their best. I don't know anybody going into the exam planning to do nonsense. So I have no expectations of that kind. I try to focus on the positive and what's possible and what is practical based on um, experience. And so going into the exam, I do expect that, putting in the work, you've already done that, is going to turn out well. So for me, like I said, I am transitioning now to Journey to SEA 2025. And so for those of you who are already into that, like say you're a standard four parent, or you are you have younger children, I think based on your experience with this exam and understanding of how the SEA process goes, then you recognize that beginning earlier, and when I say earlier, I mean, of course, earlier than standard 5 and even earlier than standard 4, that is necessary for you to really build that consistency and that momentum. So, my recommendation is to begin the SEA preparation in standard 3. And when I say SEA preparation, I mean focus on the exam itself, because from the time students hit primary school, they're preparing for SEA. As long as they're in a school that does SEA, everything that they do up to the exam is preparation for the exam. So first year, second year, standard 1, standard 2, standard 3, 4, and 5 all are preparation for the exam. In terms of getting into exam mode, there are three stages the way I see it. Standard 3 is when you start dealing with specific foundation concepts that are related to the actual exam. And so I would not necessarily give standard 3 students the kind of rigorous preparation that I would give a standard 5, but standard threes should begin to understand requirements. What is required, what is needed, what they would have to do, the kinds of things they would have to encounter, and then start laying the foundation. And then in standard 4, we are practicing and exploring and looking at the different ways and methods, because the one thing that I learned, and I learned quite a lot this year. So I'll give you three things actually, because these are the top three I think that I learned. So the first thing was that while I always knew it and I kind of worked with it with my students, it was really emphasized to me this year that there are multiple ways of doing things. And the best way is the way that works for that student. And that's something that I really would love parents and teachers to understand. There are multiple ways of doing things, and the way that works for that student is the best way for that student. Some students can adapt and change. Some students need to find a system and a process and stick with that. And so recognizing that there are multiple ways and the way that works best is what works for that student, that is something that was really reinforced to me. And so I recognize that the methods that I use, working with the multisensory and so on, they are important across the board, but some students need different applications of it. And so I have actually refined my systems and my processes to adapt to different students across the spectrum and different abilities and so on as I work with them. So that's the number one thing. The second thing that I recognized is that unless you have a study plan, saying that you're going to study is not going to be enough. And as a teacher, what I often did, I met with students once a week, and I would assign homework and so on. But I recognize that actually mapping it out and making that arrangement with students at the beginning of the term makes a big difference. And so some parents and some students, some teachers even, they're not sure, okay, how much time do I need to spend on this in order for it to for the repetition and for the reinforcement? How long do I need to study it? How often do I need to study it? And so in the case of studying and reinforcing materials, frequency is actually more important than the length of time at each sitting. So you're not really looking at can I carve out an hour or two to work on this once a week? It is actually better to do 20 minutes 4 times a week, 20 minutes 3 times a week, rather than 1 hour at a time once a week. So create a schedule. Recognize that studying is actually based on frequency and consistency with that frequency rather than just, one block of time working on something. And so that has changed the way I interact with students. And that is something that I am definitely going to be implementing as I go through with the other. When I start Journey to SEA 2025, I am going to be doing more of setting schedules to study and giving guidance about what can be done at each study session. I believe that that is going to be a lot more helpful. So I'm going to start at the beginning with that. I did it later on, but I saw the benefit of it. The third thing that I want to highlight that I really sort of, again, these are things that I knew and things that I worked with, and it has been documented, it's good educational science, but seeing it in practice and experiencing it has reinforced even more that this is what I need to be doing and this is what works with students. I did two things this term that I usually do, but I modified slightly how I did it this term and I saw a greater impact. One of the things is writing with my students. And I know many teachers write with their students and we they do like they work together to write, they brainstorm together, write an essay together. But what I did was that I wrote and students discussed with me and I wrote. So there's a difference between writing with the students, everybody working together, and the teacher writing and sort of modeling and demonstrating how things are done and how things can be done. And that's something that I did this term. I did it with all my classes, and then students were allowed to critique me. I don't know if I shared with you guys last week how that worked out. I mean, the students marked me so hard. I think they had too much fun grading me down, right? But throughout that process, they were able to see how I thought through a prompt and responded to it. And so they can get an idea of how it's possible for them to do it if they are having any challenges and how to make changes. Plus, and this is something that I didn't recognize at the time, but as I, reviewed and, looked at areas that I could, develop and upgrade, I realized that part of that whole process of me writing and the students grading me was showing them how they can receive critique. Because, sometimes when students write, and you tell them, hey, you made a mistake here, or try this instead, they get defensive because writing is so much part of us. We feel like, okay, but Miss said this, and there's always like a kind of pushback, and they feel a kind of way about making changes. But with writing, editing, and revision, that's part of the process. And as writers, we need to develop that ability to take correction because it's not about us personally. It is about making the writing the best possible piece that it can be. And so when I went through that process of writing and having the students critique me, then I was able to show them how to receive critique and how to defend themselves because, yes, I had to defend myself. That 14 was not cutting it. I got 17 in the end. I fought for my 3 marks, but but in doing that, they were able to see how you do that. So you don't just deserve 17 because what's the reason for it? These are the requirements. This is how I fulfilled the requirements. And so they could identify when they deserved more and when, yes, I understand what the teacher is saying, because they would then be able to critique themselves and to know what they did and how they performed. And so that to me was really a very invaluable part of the process that I did it later on in the term. I'll probably do it a little bit earlier, probably about midterm next time around, because I saw the benefit of that for multiple reasons. Letting students critique, having them justify their responses, being able to say what was wrong and how to fix it. That entire process worked extremely well. So, that is one thing that I did. And I did it a little bit differently this term. So I'm going to refine that process and keep doing it. The other thing that I did with students that I think made a difference and it really opened my eyes, and it's something that I've been doing for a while, but I did it again slightly differently as I keep developing and upgrading. I always have one on one sessions with my group writing classes. So even though my groups are small, I still give each student that individual undivided attention for at least 30 minutes. And what that does is that it allows the student to give that direct feedback, get the direct feedback, give them the improvement and the guidance that they need, but it also tells them that they are individually important. And so I know many parents, they want the group sessions, and because they see the benefit of it, they also want that individual session because they feel like the individual attention is needed. You can't get both. And I think that is critically important, recognizing that you need both the group context and the individual context. So, yes, your child might learn differently, and so you want that individual attention, but also give them the benefit of some group interaction. Group interaction is absolutely key to having students be able to refine their ideas and concepts within a group of their peers and not have adults working with them all the time. So, I want to encourage you as you're going into secondary school, for those of you who are transitioning, to recognize how important that is. I mean, as adults, we all know what it's like to work with people in groups who can't work in groups, and they cause all kind of problems. We want our students to be able to work in groups and to function effectively in groups, whether larger or smaller, so that they can do their best, because we are training them for life and not just an exam or just the next step in their journey. We're laying the foundation, and that's something worth remembering as well. So, all right, I think I have covered most of what I want to say. The last thing that I will add is, again, for those of you who are continuing to journey to SEA 2025, I am going on a break. So this is my last live for a couple weeks, and I'll tell you exactly how many. Um, I am going on a break, so like a month. Yeah, my next session is I'll be starting Journey to SEA 2025 on April. I'll put that on the screen so that you can see April 16, 2024. That's going to be the first session for oh, I should have put Journey to SEA 2025 launch. Yeah, let me put that. And that's April 16, 2024. And that's when I am launching that Journey to SEA 2025. So you can look out same time, and we know the time is 11 a.m. ish. Right? 11 a.m. ish, Journey to SEA 2025 is launching on April 16th. And same platforms as always, YouTube, SEA Peacefield Approach, and Wood Coach Youth. And this time around, like I said, I'll be doing comprehension from the get-go. I may or may not add in some grammar here and there, but I know it's significantly important for the grammar and the discussion on worded problems. I'm going to actually schedule days when I will deal specifically with those as well. So look out for that. Spelling worksheets, vocabulary worksheets are coming, and that would apply for both the students who are still working toward SEA and for those going into secondary school. Um, I'm working with a colleague of mine, and we're creating some wonderful interactive worksheets with spelling. More about that will be shared as the time comes closer for that launch. And for those of you who have children at the lower levels, so maybe not quite standard four, not quite going into SEA 2025 yet, um, then I'm going to be opening a group, a separate group for standards 1 to 3 and what can be done in terms of the writing grammar. So pretty much ELA for the standards 1 to 3. Um, and that would continue from there. So I'll tell you more about that. And so to get information for those things, SEA Peaceful Approach, but definitely Wood Coach Youth Facebook page. I'll be posting there as we go. Someone asked if I am going to be working with Form 1 students. Um, I have a program that I have been tinkering with for Form 1 students with literature in particular, like reading and interpretation. Put a hold on it for this year while I was focusing on the SEA. I'm going to go back to that during the vacation. So I'd probably um, I may not do videos for September, but maybe from January. But I am going to be putting some stuff together for Form 1s. And let's say from Form 1 to 3, that group, I am going to be putting together some things for them. I can't guarantee it'll be out by September, but definitely by January 2025, I'll have something for Form 1s. I believe in alternative forms of learning. So I actually created a comic book for reading and comprehension for Form 1s that I sort of tabled years ago, but I'm going to pick it back up because I think I am where I need to be with the SEA group. I have the systems, I have the structures, textbooks, some are complete, some are almost complete, so that will be done. And then I'd be able to shift some attention to the Form 1s. So definitely keep checking in with me, keep checking the Facebook page because that won't go up in Peaceville too much. That check the Wood Coast Youth Facebook page, and I will be making announcements on that. But that would come like August, September during that first term. So let's say between August to December, I'll be making announcements on the Form 1 heading into there because I am definitely going to be spreading a little bit lower classes and then upper classes as well. So thank you so much for those of you who are still here with me talking so much about closing off and so on. I do sincerely appreciate the comments, the questions, the likes. Even the times when you said, "Hey, Miss, you forgot something. You made a little thing here. You need to fix that." I appreciate all of it because it helps me present and be as meaningful and useful in terms of supporting parents and students the best way that I can. So thank you so much. And so this is Shelly Ann Edwards Barron, creative writing specialist, signing off from Journey to SEA 2024 for the last time. The next time you see me, it will be Journey to SEA 2025. So, blessings in the exam. Know that I am praying for you and that you and your child, your children, your students, the entire CA group, you are all covered and you are prepared. So, love yourself and your students through all of it. All right. Take care, guys, and I'll see you in April for Journey to SCA 2025. Bye bye.